Midnight in St. Petersburg. A palace is lit while the city sleeps, not for celebration, but for a decision that cannot survive daylight. Downstairs, desserts sit untouched, each one altered to kill. Wine waits in crystal glasses, measured with clinical precision. This is not a party. It is an execution dressed as hospitality. Upstairs, 5 men wait. Wealthy, educated, connected, a prince, a lawmaker, a doctor, a military officer, a financier. They are not debating whether this should happen. That debate ended weeks ago. Tonight is about efficiency. The man they expect believes he is admired. That belief is the weapon that brings him inside. Courts cannot touch him. Police cannot move against him. Newspapers cannot speak freely about him. When accountability fails, power takes shortcuts. Thick walls swallow sound. A basement buries screams. Poison strong enough to drop a horse waits. An exit is mapped minute by minute. Outside, the cold bites hard. Inside, tension tightens. This is not just about killing one man. It is about silencing a force that bent an empire without holding office. A car turns onto the palace street. Boots scrape ice. The trap is set. History is already watching, and it will not forget. He did not arrive with an army, a title, or a vote. He arrived with belief, and in a collapsing system, belief travels faster than authority ever can. Years earlier, he was invisible, poor, uneducated, irrelevant to the state. Then he walked away from his life and began moving from village to village, prayer to prayer, speaking with a certainty that cut through a country drowning in doubt. People listened not because he was credible, but because he sounded sure. In times of instability, confidence feels like competence. Stories followed him faster than facts could keep up. The sick felt relief. The desperate felt noticed. Coincidence hardened into rumor. Rumor inflated into miracles. Miracles became reputation. And reputation in the right environment becomes power. What made him dangerous was never what he knew, but what others projected onto him. Hope, fear, salvation, control. Institutions hesitated. He did not. Experts spoke in probabilities. He spoke in absolutes. That difference mattered more than truth. By the time officials noticed him, he was no longer asking to enter power. Power was inviting him in, quietly, informally, without rules. And here is what terrified those watching it happen. No law had been broken, no office seized, no authority challenged. Power had been handed over voluntarily, one belief at a time. When systems fail to provide certainty, people don't rebel. They outsource trust. And once trust detaches from institutions and attaches to a person, removal is no longer a process. It becomes a rupture. The moment everything shifted did not happen in public. It happened behind closed doors, far from ministers and generals, in a room where fear spoke louder than reason. A child was sick, not politically, not symbolically, but physically dying, the kind of illness that ignores rank and power. Doctors tried, medicine stalled, charts filled with uncertainty. When systems reach the edge of explanation, they reach for belief. He was invited quietly, without credentials, without records, without accountability. He did not argue with physicians or challenge treatment. He removed it. He prayed. When the child improved, whether by chance or timing, reality stopped mattering. Relief replaced doubt. Gratitude hardened into loyalty. Access followed. From that moment, doors opened that had never opened before. His presence began shaping outcomes without orders, influence without responsibility. Suggestions became decisions. Warnings became policy. Ministers learned resistance carried consequences, while support offered protection. This was not governance. It was dependency. Every success reinforced faith. Every failure was explained away. The system did not collapse overnight. It softened. It yielded. It stopped pushing back. Fear did not spread through force, but through trust misplaced. One private act of desperation rewired the court. A nation built on institutions slowly deferred to a man. And once belief outruns structure, authority dissolves quietly, leaving power everywhere and responsibility nowhere. That silence felt safe at first, until consequences surfaced, unstoppable, reminding everyone that abandoned systems always return as crises eventually violently. Power did not discipline him. It removed the last restraint. Behind closed doors, the holy image decayed quickly. Nights blurred into mornings. Alcohol flowed freely. Parties stretched until dawn. Women arrived and disappeared quietly. Followers, strangers, payments made afterward. This was no longer rumor. Police followed his movements, logged addresses, recorded voices that sang until sunrise. By day, he was consulted like an oracle. By night, he became a liability the state refused to confront. The danger was exposure. Every unchecked night widened the gap between belief and reality. Hypocrisy spread faster than truth. Officials knew, the court knew, everyone knew, yet nothing happened. Acting would mean admitting power had been misplaced. Silence became protection. Protection became complicity. Personal decay turned political poison. Each ignored report weakened legitimacy. Each indulgence sharpened resentment. The question shifted. It was no longer whether he was corrupt, but whether the state had become corrupt by defending him. Once that question surfaced, outcomes narrowed. When authority refuses correction, pressure seeks release elsewhere. Eventually, it always does. Violently, decisively, without permission. The collapse did not arrive as scandal. It arrived as inevitability, slow, silent, and unstoppable. What followed was not outrage but exhaustion, a public sensing something rotten yet powerless to intervene, watching institutions protect decay, realizing that when restraint vanishes at the top, collapse spreads downward with terrifying patience until nothing feels stable anymore anywhere. By now, the problem was no longer one man. It was a nation unraveling around him. War drained resources, emptied villages, and returned coffins by the thousands. Food lines stretched longer. Factories slowed. Morale collapsed, while decisions stalled at the top. Hovering over every failure was the same name, whispered in kitchens, shouted in factories, muttered in government corridors like a curse without cure. Censorship cracked under pressure. Newspapers paid fines just to print fragments of truth. Cartoons circulated. Pamphlets spread hand to hand. The message was blunt. The empire was being steered by someone no one had chosen and no one could remove. Inside Parliament, restraint evaporated. Speeches sharpened. One address finally crossed the line, public and unforgiving, stating openly that this man was destroying the country from within. The room did not gasp. It applauded. That applause mattered. Outrage had become consensus. Patience vanished. Legal solutions felt cosmetic. Reform felt impossible. The system had protected him too long to act cleanly now. And when lawful paths close, pressure does not disappear. It changes form. The unspoken idea settled heavily across the elite. If the state could not remove him, someone else would. Quietly, privately, permanently. What followed was not chaos yet, but certainty forming, cold and deliberate, as consequence replaced debate across halls of power without remorse today. They did not gather in shadows because they were afraid. They gathered there because they were certain. Each man represented the state in a different form: royalty, law, medicine, force, money. Together they decided the state had failed. What could not be fixed publicly would be corrected privately. This was not a mob. It was a committee. Calm voices, assigned roles. Violence discussed like logistics, not sin. No one used the word murder. That word implied chaos and emotion. This was framed as maintenance, a necessary cut to keep the body alive. They convinced themselves courts were too slow, police too compromised, exposure too dangerous. Acting openly would only weaken the throne further. So they stepped outside the system to save it. That logic felt clean. They planned with professional detachment. Who would invite him? Where sound would die, how time would be controlled, how evidence would vanish. Minutes mattered more than morals. Roots mattered more than doubt. The most chilling part was not hatred. It was confidence, the belief that history would understand. This is how atrocities become reasonable. Not through rage, but certainty. When powerful people decide they are the last defense, Restraint dissolves. By the time the plan was finished, the decision no longer belonged to conscience. It belonged to momentum, and momentum does not stop itself. The plan was designed to eliminate chance, or at least the illusion of it. Every step was timed, justified, rehearsed. The location was chosen because it swallowed sound. Thick walls, no windows, a basement meant to bury noise before it reached the street. Poison was selected for speed, measured, mixed into wine to mask taste and certainty. Pastries ensured ingestion. If poison failed, there was a second method. If that failed, a third. Redundancy masqueraded as control. They mapped routes like a military operation. Who arrived first? Who waited upstairs? Who stayed with him? Where the car would park? How many minutes before suspicion? Evidence would burn. Water cold enough to erase weight and memory waited beyond the city. By morning, the problem would simply stop existing. The entire plan rested on cooperation. That he would come willingly. That he would eat. That he would drink. That belief, the same force that carried him into power, would carry him into the trap. They called it inevitable. They called it necessary. What they did not call it was fragile. Because plans built on certainty ignore the one variable power can never control: resistance, chance, and the refusal of reality. It should have ended already. That was the first mistake. Minutes passed, then more, glasses emptied, plates cleared, and nothing happened. No collapse, no convulsions, no silence. The poison failed. Time stretched into danger. Upstairs, confidence cracked. Downstairs, control slipped. Every second he remained standing rewrote the plan. Panic crept in, unspoken but visible. A decision came without debate. A pistol replaced patience. One shot shattered the basement, sharp, final, convincing. His body fell. Breath stuttered. Darkness followed. Relief surged, brief and reckless. Then movement. Footsteps where there should have been none. A door opening against expectation. He staggered into the cold, wounded, bleeding, alive. The illusion collapsed instantly. Order dissolved. What was meant to be silent spilled into the open. Shots rang out. No longer careful, no longer clean. This was not procedure anymore. It was pursuit. Control gave way to improvisation. Certainty turned to damage control. In that chaos, one truth became unavoidable. They had not ended a problem. They had exposed it. The plan did not fail quietly. It failed loudly, violently, and in doing so revealed the lie at its core. Power can design certainty, but reality never agrees. And history records moments like this not as accidents, but as warnings ignored repeatedly by those responsible. By the time the body stopped moving, the night had already noticed. Snow in the courtyard carried footprints. Gunshots had traveled. Neighbors had listened. A policeman had come and gone. Whatever secrecy they imagined was gone with the echo. Still they continued, not because it would restore order, but because there was nothing else left. The body was wrapped, weighted, driven beyond the city. Ice cracked open and water closed, cold and indifferent. They told themselves disappearance meant resolution. It did not. Evidence surfaced immediately. Blood on a bridge, clothing caught beneath ice. Rumors moved faster than orders. Everyone knew who had been involved, and nothing happened. No arrests, no trials, no public reckoning. The system that failed to stop him now failed to judge his killers. Violence was completed. Justice never arrived. The silence afterward was not peace. It was decay settling deeper. Power protected itself again, proving the final cruelty of the night was not death, but confirmation that accountability no longer existed anywhere. That knowledge lingered, heavy and unresolved, long after the streets returned to sleep again. Killing him did not repair the system. It exposed it. The belief that removing one man could restore order was comforting and completely false. After his death, the same institutions remained slow, compromised, afraid of themselves. Fear did not disappear. Corruption did not retreat. Power simply relocated, quieter, harder to see. This is the uncomfortable lesson that survives every era. When courts lose trust, when media fractures, when accountability feels optional, people begin trusting individuals instead of structures. Someone will always argue that shortcuts are necessary. Violence will always be framed as efficiency. History shows where that logic ends. For American audiences, this is not a story about imperial Russia. It is a mirror. It asks what happens when patience runs out and certainty feels scarce. Real reform is harder than removal. It is slower, less cinematic, less satisfying, but it is the only solution that lasts. Everything else merely postpones collapse. If this story unsettles you, it should. Systems do not fail loudly at first. They fail quietly eventually.